Hello Venera. In this short screencast, I'm going to give you feedback to your summary from last week. Okay, so let's begin. In the TED video, you want to include the title of the video, remember? We include those three components: title, name of the speaker, which you have done, and then the main idea, right? Argues that is a very good reporting verb. All people have an implicit bias connected with diversity. Okay, fine. So you try to make it argumentative, which is good. But we all have our implicit biases. That's all very good. Connected with diversity sounds a little bit sort of vague. In what way are they connected to diversity? Does that mean that we react to other people who are different, and that causes us to have bias? Just when you say connected with diversity is a little bit vague. So maybe you want to rephrase that. And also, you can expand this a little bit, because part of the main idea is also the recommendations he gives it in the second half of the video, right? So you can expand by mentioning the recommendations given. But if we take active steps to examine our own biases, blah, 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 something like that, right? So the main idea would include the fact that we all have implicit biases, but also there are things we need to do about those, steps we need to take. So all of that should be in the main idea. Because remember, the main idea should try and summarize the whole video. Okay. He explains that a bias is a preference for or a prejudice against a person or a group of people, and it should be controlled. Okay, fine. Yes. He starts with a definition, and you've tried to sort of paraphrase the definition in your own words, which is very good. That's what you need to do. Instead of simply repeating the phrasing that he uses, you've tried to paraphrase. That's good. He continues by defining the main characteristics of implicit biases. We're talking about implicit biases in general. The implicit bias makes it sound like it's one particular bias, this particular one, which is not what he's talking about. He's talking about biases in general. So the characteristics of implicit biases, which are. Now here, you've tried to combine all of them in one sentence. Not a bad idea, but it just doesn't work grammatically here. Which are operating, the ing here, infinitive would also not work. So grammatically it just doesn't work. The three characteristics of implicit biases, I don't know how you would continue in one sentence. I would just split it into three, really. I'm not sure, maybe a that clause would allow you to do that. He continues by defining the main characteristics of implicit biases, which, yeah, I don't even know how to continue, which include the fact that they operate, they run contrary, and they bring, maybe, which include the fact that, but it's clumsy. That would be very clumsy to put it that way. So yeah, just, I guess, split them into three different sentences. And using cohesive devices, that would actually make it quite nice. He defines the main characteristics of implicit biases first, or another way you could just do here, you could do a colon and then use full phrasing with a, because the ing here really doesn't work. So instead of that, you need a subject and a verb. They are, they operate at the subconscious level. They run contrary to, right? That would work. The colon and then full independent phrases. They do this, they do that, they run contrary. Okay. Now here, and they bring automatic mental association that people behave every day. Okay, nice. So that's good. The speaker then gives the reasons for focusing on the implicit bias. Again, it's not one specific bias, it's biases in general. For focusing on, yeah, okay, that's a good word to use, but it's not so proactive. You know, he's really very serious about we need to examine our biases. We need to solve this problem. Focus on, you could focus on something just by reading about it, you know, hearing it on the news. It's not really so proactive, this word choice, right? So maybe you want to choose another word which suggests that we need to seriously and aggressively go and tackle these biases, because that's kind of what he's talking about. Focusing on is a little bit weak as a verb. We need something more, a stronger, kind of more proactive, right? Verb here. He gives the 3 reasons for focusing on implicit bias. First of all, this focus will expand diagnosis. Now here you are repeating his wording. I'm not very sure that that's a good idea, particularly because we're trying to avoid plagiarism also in these summaries. So what does he say? What's his first recommendation? And you don't necessarily need to call them reasons. You can just call them recommendations, because that's what they are. A call to action, a recommendation. So what does he say? First, what? We need to be aware of the problem. We need to be able to diagnose our problem so that we can blah blah, right? And here you've added a reason. You've done this several times in this paragraph, which is very good. You always try to kind of connect the idea as you hear it in the video and then add a commentary of your own, right? So that's good. I'm not saying you should add things that are not in the lecture, but you are trying in your own words to say, what will expanding the diagnosis do, right? So that's a very good idea. You didn't just say, let's expand the diagnosis, but you said, and it would make it easy to improve the situation. Although I would say this phrasing is a little bit too vague, but at least you tried. So to make it more specific, in your own words, you could just say, I don't know, something like, we need to be able to diagnose the problem of biases so that we're in a better position to solve the problem or something. Yeah, you can just try and phrase it nicely, right? It would be easier to improve the situation, especially improve the situation sounds a little bit vague, okay? And again here, try not to repeat the wording too closely, the speaker's exact words, okay? The second reason is that this will allow us to predict and prevent discriminatory behavior. Sure, in a certain place, time, or country, okay, fine. I'm not sure you need that necessarily. Instead, you could just say, we could just really end with discriminatory behavior. We need to be able to predict. Or you could just say here, instead of time, place, country, you could say situation. So we need to be able to predict whether when we're in a certain situation, we will be likely to, I don't know, engage in discriminatory behavior, something like that. Again, predict and prevent is exactly the wording that he used. So Hockett's, again, you can use the name several times if you want to. Hockett's second recommendation is that we need to analyze our own biases first so that we can prevent blah blah blah, right? I guess you can use predict and prevent, but really in your own sentence. We need to be able to predict situations which are likely to, I don't know, likely to to cause us to have biases. Something like that. You can use your own phrasing. Okay. Lastly, he notices that it helps to reduce shaming about one's own and others' biases. Yeah, he does talk about, this is a little bit unclear here. He's talking about open discussion without shame. So that's the point, is that we should not be ashamed of our biases, just really talk about them freely and openly. If we want to fix it, we need to first start talking about it. So maybe that's what you can say. Again, this is exactly his phrasing, so you can use your own words a little bit more, right? Open discussion, I'm not sure. Something that would suggest that we need to, instead of being ashamed of our biases, we need to start talking about that openly and freely, right? Finally, he cites one famous, here you don't need to say who that psychologist is. And also, I'm not sure if this is adding anything to the summary here. Every human being needs to have a person irrationally crazy about him or her. That is just something that he says. It's not really a supporting idea. He does end with that, but it's just like a quotation that he ends with. But really, it's not a supporting idea. I mean, I'm not sure what that would add to the summary, because we are talking about biases, and then all of a sudden people irrationally crazy about him or her. I don't know. He does mention it, but now another, this is again, you try to do that often, which is you try to connect what you hear in the lecture with your own sort of reason, and this can be possible only after, so that's good. But again, if you don't even mention this one, the quote, then you would not need this. Instead, what does he really end with? Finally, what does he talk about? Because he doesn't just quote from this psychologist, he actually says that we need to really get serious about our biases. We really need to start examining them. Something like that. We need to start from inside. We need to start looking from the inside, and then that kind of work, internal work he calls it, that will help us, make the world a better place, produce positive change in the world around us if we start by examining our own biases. So we can say something like that. Okay. Overall, you've used quite a few reporting verbs. He continues, he explains, gives reasons. Okay, he notices. Sure. I like that you use the present tense. Maybe you could use a few more cohesive devices here and there. Although just the word continues itself is a kind of a linking device, right? But you could say additionally, furthermore, that kind of stuff. Like here, for instance, finally, right? So maybe a few more of those. But overall, this makes a lot of sense, your summary, and I really like the fact that you're trying to use your own words. You're trying, and it is quite focused. So yeah, good work. I hope this is helpful. Good luck.